G'day you mob, how's it going? Welcome to this episode of Pete vs. Plants. I'm Pete. Peaches is over here somewhere. Get in the shot, Peach. And these are the plants. So we have some Philodendron domesticum variegata today to chop up. I've had these for a while. I think I would have had them in the unboxing video that you can go and check out here. You can see what they first looked like. I chucked them into leca and they kind of had a slow start and then gradually started taking off and pushing out probably 3 or 4 leaves each. Since then, this one got an absolutely stunning half moon that came out and you can see that it's starting to size up. Variegation seems to be pretty stable on these guys. It may sort of flicker in and out, like you randomly get a half moon here, then the next one's sort of predominantly green, then the next one after that has a little bit of variegation, and then now we're back to, you know, mostly variegated. So yeah, anyway, I'm a massive fan of Aurea variegated plants, these ones that are more Can I help you? Hands off the merch, Peach. You're meant to look, not touch, okay?
I'm not allowed to touch.
Anyway, I'm a massive fan of the Aurea variegation, and these seem to be some that are easy to keep without them browning off, like Aurea monstera, which are just a pain in the butt. So anyway, I sort of air layered them when I first got them, though to be honest, the moss that I have inside the Glad wrap here has been a total pain in the ass to try and keep wet. A big reason is that if you keep moistening it, the water trickles into the vessel here, and I don't want the level to sort of keep getting too high. So if you were going to use this kind of a method and you do water the moss when that dries out, even if there's plenty of water in the reservoir here, you kind of have to keep tipping out the excess water, which is a bit of a pain in the butt. So if I were to do this again, I think what I would use, get rid of some of the dried up sheets here, what I would use is the Ziploc bag method instead, where you shove a Ziploc bag around the node that you're trying to air layer, put the moss in there, wet that. There is a little hole in there for excess water to run off, but usually it holds on to the moisture much longer, and so you would actually be filling up the reservoir on these more than you would be watering the moss to keep that moist. So I guess what we're going to do here is I might take these plants out of leca. I'm not really sure, to be honest. Like, they've been surviving and they've been doing okay, but I want to at least cut them all the way down to where I've air layered and then pot them up, and I'll probably take cuttings above that as well and just water propagate those because they're just so large I can't really fit them into an aeroponic system easily. So I have just taken a razor blade. We are going to sterilize that. So well, I already have. Chuck some rubbing alcohol on it. I'm just going to leave it on a piece of paper here whilst I guess we get the first one out. I might see if we can unwrap this and remove the moss without getting the plant out of the leca and have a look at what's been going on. But it's also going to depend on whether or not the roots have escaped the attempt at air layering and grown down into the leca, because if that's the case, then it's sort of inevitable and you do have to take the plant out to be able to chop it up and take the nodes out and plant them up. Now what you could do here, if you were so inclined, is take the part that you have air layered, wow, there's lots of roots down the bottom here, and just pot that up in soil or leca or whatever it is that you want, right? And you could leave the top on. I'm trying to get a whole bunch of plants, so I'm actually going to take a bunch of cuttings from this and hopefully get those to root, probably in water. These ones with these roots like this, these aerial roots, these will do really well in water, especially if you're using an air stone. I've found that really speeds things up. It sort of mimics aeroponics to some degree, although the ratio of air to water would be higher in the water end of things. Aeroponics, it's obviously higher in the air. You know, there's water being sprayed around, but mostly air. With the air bubbler, mostly water, but there's aeration happening. The bubbler also seems to keep a lot of the algae at bay. So for any of the propagations where I'm using a bubbler, it seems like there's very little algae. Even if I'm using nutrient solution in the vessels with the water in there, it seems like very little algae grows, or at least it grows a lot more slowly. So yeah, that's another reason to use it. Even if it doesn't necessarily speed up the process for you, you don't have to change the water over as often, you know, it doesn't get gross and stagnant. So yeah, I don't know how easy this is going to be to remove the moss, to be honest, guys. So it may just be inevitable that we have to take the plant out and then do it, because it's just going to be easier to move things around, I think. So I'm going to grab a container to pour the leca out, and I guess we'll do it with both of them. So I'll take but it looks like, at least from what I can see already, that we have had a lot of really good root growth with this air layering, even though the moss has repeatedly dried out on me and is pretty dry currently in some of these. The roots look nice and thick. They don't look like they've rotted as a result of being dry, and I'm sort of wondering too, is that because they've gotten down into the leca and is sucking up moisture that way? I guess we'll find out. But yeah, I think in future, Ziploc bag. All right, and I'm gonna have to wet the moss in this one. This is bone dry. Otherwise, I won't be able to get the moss off. Okay. All right, so I've got the plants out of the leca. Here is what they're looking like. Here's what they look like. Some of them had a little bit of rot down the bottom, but it had been like the rot had taken place and then they had regrown roots. So yeah, it is interesting. It was probably just them adjusting to being in leca. I have found that quite often you will get a bit of root rot. It takes a while, the plant eventually recovers and then develops its own roots in leca. But I think what I'm going to do is actually take these guys out and chuck one of them in pond and the other one in soil and see how they go. So that might be interesting to see. Air layering wise, you can see loads of roots here. They made their way down to close to where the leca was, and then I think the glad wrap was sort of a barrier there, so they just kind of stayed there. It was probably also a bit of a build-up of moisture down low as well. So I'm going to try and remove as much of this moss as possible, but there's actually loads of roots in here, so it's one of those things, it's kind of hard to do. Maybe I will take some cuttings first and divide things up, sort of divide and conquer. I just have to work out where I want to chop and how to get to it. It's the only thing. Moss is a powerful substrate to use, but I tell you what, it is such a pain in the ass to try and remove from roots that it almost makes it not worth using sometimes, especially when you have philodendron roots that kind of grip onto the moss and are also finer than, say, monstera ones, and are just a much more difficult. See, you can see that is a root there, right? That's tiny, and it just blends in with the moss so well. So I think what I'm going to do, where's my razor blade that I disinfected? I think I'm going to cut here, right at this point above. So I've got 3 nodes there. I could make this a single cutting, but I'm kind of greedy, so to be honest, I'm probably going to divide this up into 3. In fact, I will do that right before your eyes. Oof, this really smells strong. I've forgotten the such a strong sort of smell from chopping up philodendron cuttings, and the razor blade goes through so easily. All right, so here are the 3 cuttings. I'm just going to let them dry over the side here for probably, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. I might deal with them a bit later on. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this plant. I'm going down as far as I can see until I get to the node that is shooting out tons of roots here into this mass of moss. So again, I think that's looks like it's another 3 nodes. So I'm going to try and slice through gently without taking my finger off and without damaging the other petioles. All right, so same story here, I think. I'm going to get greedy and take another 3 cuttings. Hopefully, they have relatively short internodes, so hopefully it's not going to give me as much space if rot happens, but hopefully we do okay and it pays off. So there we go, there's another 3 cuttings. 2 tip cuttings and 4 mid cuttings. All right. So yeah, the moss really is a pain in the ass to try and get off. I'm just trying to work out down here. I'm probably going to cut as far down as just to give 1 leaf to the bottom plant here. It'll have a few nodes to be able to sort of recover from that. But then I'm sort of thinking maybe I just plant this whole thing with the moss. I'll try and remove as much of the moss as possible, but if I can't, it's kind of a bit of a bitch, a pain in the butt. How am I going to get in here? Yeah, see, I can see another rotted root. Oh, wow, okay. These roots, yeah, okay, so the ones that were growing out of, they had gotten out of the moss here, and they had grown down into the leca. So that's cool. That means we're going to have a decent amount of growth here. I just have to avoid damaging them when I give this the chop. All right, I'm going to try and do it. Get in there. Just go slowly until I feel a bit of give. There we go. I think I got it. Sweet. All right, so there's the bottom plant. Beautiful leaf there. The root system should do pretty well, especially transitioning it into another passive hydro setup. Now, this thing could be 2 cuttings. It depends on being able to separate the moss out and how well rooted each of the nodes are. But I imagine that both of these nodes are going to be rooted phenomenally. But yeah, it is just like a hornet's nest here. Hornet's nest? You know what I mean. It is very difficult to get in. The rat's nest. Maybe that's what I'm thinking about. So again, it's that sort of thing of how much damage do you do trying to separate these 2 things out. Okay, so I can see the internodal spacing here. I am going to give it the chop. Gently, gently, feeling, cool, I'm through. And then I'm just going to try and separate things out, I guess. Gently without hopefully doing too much damage to the root systems that are in here. Ooh, oh no. We have our first victim. Should have checked that first. Chopping the the plant off at the bottom there, I did take the leaf off. So we will have a wet stick in here. Oh no, actually it should be okay. We've got 2 leaves still. Okay, how do we, good God, what a mess. All right, I might just have to be a little rough and just accept that there will be a bit of root damage here because I don't have all day and I'm a little impatient. How much of this can I get off? Oof, okay, got that one off. That root's out. This one. Oof, okay, he's out. So I'm taking the sort of large roots off the chunk of moss and trying to separate them out so that they stay attached to the node that they're attached to. But they're kind of intertwined. Both nodes' roots are intertwined together. All right, we're getting there. There we go. That's better. Boom. Yeah, there's definitely going to be an easier way of doing this. The other option would be just making sure that when you air layer, it's just a single node, as opposed to multiple nodes here. I have layered there were probably 3 nodes in here that were sort of all stuck together. And so their roots are stuck in the moss, but also attached to one another really well. Okay. All right, it looks like one of these is actually going to have the sort of the bulk of the roots, and the other cutting doesn't. The good thing is if I do accidentally rip off the roots from one of these, I can just turn it into a cutting that I try and root in water. So there's always that too. You've got sort of these steps that you can kind of fall back on. You know, if it's got a really big root system, but then it's suffering from root rot and you need to remove part of it, that's okay. You can chop off some of the roots. If you lose all the roots for some reason, you can water propagate. If you lose the leaf, you can turn it into a wet stick. You know, so you can kind of just, you've got a whole bunch of these if-then kind of scenarios that you can rely on, right? Sort of like defenses. If you were an army attacking somewhere, you can keep falling back to these different positions to be able to hopefully save the cutting. And this is taking way longer than I was sort of expecting it to. What can you do? But yeah, these roots are, look at that, nice and long. They're just all curled up. All right, boom, we are apart. Sweet, okay, so now I'm just going to try and sort of remove as much of the moss from the root system as possible. And I will probably, as a result of the moss being on here, I'm probably going to just pot them up in soil, because I find that if you try and chuck them into semi-hydro, they they can rot a lot more easily because of the amount of moss that is going to suck up a heap of water. And if it's just too hard to remove all the moss, or you just can't be bothered, then chuck it in soil and just water it a little less frequently. Tends to be the go for me, at least. That's worked well up until now. Again, it's just phenomenal. The root growth here, most of this is roots. So that's absolutely amazing. It's done really well. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 roots that have come out from around the node there that have done phenomenally. And they all have their own little secondary and tertiary root systems that have sort of sprouted out, which is great. Stuff blowing around outside. All right, I think I'm going to sort of call it a day with this one, moss-wise. There's only sort of little chunks there left. All right, so we'll leave that there. Do the same thing here, try and remove as much as possible. This one only has, by the looks of it, 1, 2 decent thick roots coming out into this root ball. So many of these roots may not actually belong to this guy. I may have ripped them off the other one, but I guess we'll see as we remove chunks of the moss who belongs to what. Sometimes that happens. You'll end up separating out 2 different nodes and their roots, and then you'll find out that half the root mass that you have in front of you is actually from the other one that you've separated. You're kind of like, fuck. Okay, I think we've done about as well as I can do there. There is a bit of moss, but it's no longer the kind of long tendrils that you can easily pull out. It's all the fluffy stuff that the roots have sort of grown into, but hopefully that does okay. Again, though, I think that is all of this root system, so this one should take off, should go off like a frog in a sock, guys. Should do really well. So we're getting loads of cuttings here, guys. We're getting loads. So I might leave these guys out. So we got that one, and then we still have this plant. Far out. So I guess we have a look at the bottom here. So this leaf, don't destroy that leaf, Pete. And there's this one as well on the next node up. So maybe I try and leave 2 leaves there at the bottom. And see if I can actually get in there, see what's what. What? Okay, how do I expose? This is the hardest part, trying to actually see. Trying to get to the node that you want to cut so that you can separate everything out. It's just, there's roots everywhere and I don't want to cut through the roots. Especially because they have grown all down along the stem, which makes life harder. So let's try and separate out some of this moss so I can see in here. Jesus. That's a petiole. Don't chop through that. How do we go through here? Alright, I'm going to try and move some of these roots around, separate them out from the bunch so that I can more easily get in here. You come out. All right, I think I'm gonna have to chop. I'm trying to find where this last leaf is coming from. The internodal spacing on this one is much closer together, so it makes life a little harder. All right, I can kind of see where I need to chop, but again, there are roots there, which is annoying. Trying to pull them out gently, hopefully without breaking them. Oh, nice, okay. Sweet. Maintain the integrity of the roots. And I might have to use a knife because I have to try and get into this space here, and there's a leaf in its sheath here which I don't want to cut through. So maybe I can use the razor blade. I guess we'll see. I am chopping into the sheath. I'll have to go on this side and see if I can go through the other part. I cut there. Did it. I think I separated it without breaking the leaf off. Hopefully. Oh no, I think I may have. Bugger. I think it's going to be unavoidable because I've sort of cut slightly into the sheath. I kind of had to be able to get through the node. There is a big root that's grown down into the base of the plant here. All right, let's see if I can just gently separate these two by giving them a tug. Oh man, that's not going to come. Yeah. Did it come? Yeah, it broke. All right, let's see if I can just do this gently. The leaves come off. What can you do? All right, another victim, but ugly leaf. But it would have been good. Had loads of chlorophyll. But here you go. Here is the base. Let's take off this bottom of the sheath here. That's just going to rot away. There's the base of the plant. I've got 2 nodes, so just in case there are 2 axillary buds that can grow out. So he's good to go. We'll chuck him down. And then we have probably 2 or 3 here. So I guess I'll get chopping gently. Okay, we're through. Sounds like an action movie. We're through. We've gotten through. You know, they're like trying to hack something. We're in. Whew, that smell is so strong. I didn't realize the domesticum was so stenchy when you cut them up. I know that some philodendron, the soderoy and the brantianums, they stink like all buggery. Can I separate these out? Here, we give it the pull of faith. Come on. No, it's still sort of tied up together. Come on, separate out. There we go. Oof, okay, very little on that one. So that may be one that I need to keep as 2 leaves and chuck in water propagation. It looks like the bulk of this root system was this node on top. Sometimes it can be a little deceiving. You think, oh, they've all done pretty well. And then when you actually pull it apart, you're like, nope, one node dominated. It took up all the space. And the other ones were just sort of like, we'll just go along for the ride, just free riding. Free riding. Okay, there we go. Not too bad. I'll leave that one here. Guys, it was totally ambitious of me to think that I was going to be able to smash all this out before having to get my kids from daycare. So I think we're going to have to hit pause there for the moment. And I'm going to go pick up my kids. Ugh, rotted roots. And then we will pot these guys up and or chuck them into propagation. And I just noticed that the camera is crooked, so forgive me for that. Crooked again. That didn't help. That made it worse. There we go. Look at that. All right. So I'll go get the kids, and then we will hopefully carry on. Alrighty, guys. That took longer than expected, but we are back. It is about 10 o'clock, and I've decided to grab myself a Strongbow dry cider. It's been a while since I've had these ciders, but I remember drinking loads of these when I was younger. I can't handle the sweet ones anymore, though. To be honest, I have one of those and I'm just like, ugh, too much. So low carb it is. I assume that's dry, but yeah, bottoms up. Ah, so good. So good. Anyway, here are the cuttings. So I've got loads of these, obviously, which is good. Hopefully they all survive. We've got some that we're going to plant up in pond, and I have a range of different vessels here of differing sizes. So we're going to see how that goes, and then there'll be a few water propagations, and I guess we'll also consider chucking the moss ones in soil because there was so much moss on the roots that I kind of feel a bit weird chucking them into pond. So yeah, we'll see how we go, but I also don't know how much pond I have left, so I think I'll be able to do at least one, and if we can't spread it over the 2 base of the plants that we had that were in leca, I might just chuck one back in leca. We'll see how we go as we get through it. All right, so I'm going to move these out of the way. And to sort of keep the roots nice and moist, I just blanketed some moss on there. So I'm sort of going to pull everything out. It should all be nicely calloused over now. It's been sitting here for about 5 or 6 hours now, hence the moss. So this is just pretty damp moss that I've done to keep those roots nice and hydrated. And it should hopefully just shake off pretty easily. Yeah, not attaching at all. Brilliant. All right, those are the 2 bases of the plants. This one's, it's a bit iffy. That's probably going to need to go in water for a few weeks as well. And we have another one here. Let's see, is this moss coming off or is that it? I think that was about as good as we got it, right? And it feels a bit sort of tenuous pulling at this because there's only 2 points where the roots are actually attaching to the cutting at the bottom here. So I think I might just leave that as is. Could probably sit here longer and pull off a little bit more, but it's kind of diminishing returns, I think. And you may notice me speaking a little more quietly. It's because my daughter has been a pain in the butt tonight getting to sleep. So she's in the room around the corner there with my wife at the moment, and we are hoping that she nods off soon. All right, so I'm gonna get this out of the way. I was going to use a bunch of this leca as reservoir, but it's sort of mixed with the moss. So I'm gonna grab my other jug of leca. This was actually the leca from the 2 vases or jars that the plants were originally in. And I'm gonna have to do this as quietly as possible. We might size these up first. Let's see. So we've got something like this. Jesus. Might need a little more space. This one may handle one of the smaller ones there, but I kind of want a bit more depth for it to go down in, if that makes sense, for the roots to sort of grow downwards. I think I would situate it about here, so the reservoir will be down the bottom there, probably about to here or so, and I kind of want a bit more space for the roots to fill out. So the other alternative is to use this guy and give it loads of space. We may just use these 2 tallest ones. I was even considering planting these up together just to save on space, seeing as they're going to be mother plants, and using something like this. So that's the other alternative. I could plant these ladies together, and I could even, again, in the name of saving space, sort of plant them like that. Might do that actually, guys, and we'll see how this goes, because I think it means we might get a little more mileage out of the pond. So I like using leca as the reservoir because it makes the pond go a little further, but it's a little easier to see the water level in. I don't know if you guys have used much pond, but I find that at times it's hard to tell. You have to sort of go right up to it and often tip the pot to really see where is that water level at, especially when algae and grunge and other stuff starts building up around the base where the reservoir is. Peach is just doing some breakdancing here. Going nuts. It's that hour, huh? So my wife's going to come out and be like, what the hell is all this noise? Why are you playing marbles? I'm going to try and put this leca in as quietly as possible. I'll tell you what, talk about a material that is not quiet. And no matter what you do with it, it seems to always involve a lot of sound. So I'm probably going to put a few centimeters worth of leca at the bottom here. Maybe a little bit more than that. Yeah, it doesn't really harm. And I noticed too that the roots readily just grow down into the leca, to be honest. So I think that's probably enough. Then I normally leave a baseline, a sort of thin layer of pond. And I have some here. This is ultra dry, so I'm gonna have to moisten this up. But we'll pour this in. It's gonna fall through the gaps anyway. Okay. Oof. All right, so hopefully that is a good base to kind of work with. Now I'm gonna have to find the pond in the box that I've got here. I've got all the soil boxes stacked up one on top of the other to make sure that Peaches didn't use them as kitty litter box. Totally thought that was coming. I'd come home and just find a big cat turd in there. Just a little thanks from Peaches. Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
You expect to leave this hanging around and me to not shedding it? What are these? Just marks. Oh, looks like scale or something. Weird. Little scabby things on the base here that I'm not sure what they are. Seen those before. Interesting. I don't know, this sort of one that's embedded there could just be a bit of crusting on the plant. Anyway, it's probably damage from the leca. Okay, so I'm going to get these 2 guys in here. What I am going to try and do is make sure that where the growth point is, where it's going to activate from, is going to be sitting above the level of the leca the pond that's in there, because I don't want it to have to sort of grow through it too much, if at all. All right, I'm going to do this off camera to save time. Okay, so here we go. I just want to make sure that these leaves aren't overlapping too much so that they maximize the amount of light absorption capacity that they have. Right, you don't want to hinder them too much. Hopefully you can see that I have left the two tops of the cuttings, or the bases of the plants rather, above the line of the pond. I also do that so as to avoid rot. And then hopefully, yeah, the nodes are about, I don't know, a centimetre or two below where they've been cut. Hopefully they will activate and shoot out new growth. Probably in the next month or so, you'll start noticing that. Now, I have noticed a little pocket down here, so what I am going to do is I think I might grab a paintbrush like this. These taper pretty well, and they've got sort of round edges. I was using stuff like a chopstick, but these tend to be a little sort of sharper, or have more abrupt corners on them. So I have a feeling something like that will do a little less damage. Anyway, so I'm moving this in, and then I'm kind of just pushing the roots inwards, it's sort of going like that to allow some of the substrate to just fall down into place. And I do that because I want as much of the substrate to sort of be in contact with the roots as possible. I don't want there to be any sort of air pockets or just pockets of water. There's another example there. And the roots, you'll pretty quickly see them just grow through everything anyway. So they should start growing along the surface, or the surface of the container pretty quickly. It's pretty impressive to see. Pond seems to be an amazing substrate, guys. I really wish it was cheaper and more readily available in Australia. And I might do a tiny amount on this side too. All right, I think we are good. Looks like we got some good coverage around here. Again, I'm just going to give it quite a few of these sort of shakes and taps, hoping that any air pockets that are in there are just going to get filled up with pond. You may also notice I have cut this with perlite. I've kind of just eyeballed it and chucked in about, I don't know, I think it was about half of one of these of perlite into my remaining bucket here of pond. There wasn't much in there, so I had to make the most of it. Now I'm just going to use standard tap water and fill up to probably a centimetre or so up the pond. It could be maybe a little bit extra, because I do know that because this is such dry pond, it's going to wick up really quickly. So within a few days, I'm probably going to have to water it again anyway. So I'm going to go do that, and then we'll set it down. Okay, so there we go. You can see it's up to about here. It's probably going to drop down to about there in the next 2 days, maybe even by tomorrow. They are overlapping slightly too much, but should be all good. Should see how they go. Fingers crossed, we're going to maximize space usage, and hopefully these guys go off like a frog in a sock. All right, we do have a little bit more pond left, so perhaps I'll chuck some more of these guys into pond. Which one should we do? So they've been here for ages now. What I will do is just to double down on, good practices. I'm just gonna, maybe I'll even use the paintbrush here to just assist me getting around these roots, and paint some of the charcoal here onto the base and the top, the parts of the cutting here that have been cut. So I'm using it to sort of scoop up a little bit, and then just tap it over the top. All right, so let's see, who is probably the best contender for pond? We'll give it a go with this moss on there anyway. It seems like we've removed, I think this one has probably done the best job with moss removal. So I might have a little look-see and see if I can remove a little bit more, but there are so many fine roots here that what I think, is moss, it tends to be secondary roots. There's moss attached to it, but there's tiny, tiny little bits. It's not easy to sort of pull it off. And I guess we'll just see how it goes. If it starts going downhill, the roots will probably rot off, and we'll just have to propagate it in water. You guys are probably screaming at me, don't do it, don't put it into pond, it's got moss on it. Who knows, maybe it'll survive, maybe it'll do well. Alright, I think I really have done as best I can for now without doing too much more damage. So we'll just chuck it in and see how it goes. Hopefully I've got enough pon. What can I do with making sure that... Peaches, take a chill pill. That the top of the cutting isn't submerged. Alright, I guess I will try and hold it like this, whilst, you know what I can do? I will pour the pon into this vessel. Looks like there should be enough. There's the amount of pon that we have. There is a lot of perlite in here, but hopefully it does okay. And we'll just pour it in, I guess, and see how it goes. There's just a lot of perlite in here. It's going to have good drainage. What I will do here is use the chopstick. That I showed you before as just a little bit of support for this guy. Just to make sure that it is standing or sitting upright. You can stand or sit, mate, it's up to you. Cool. And the axillary bud is exposed, so it should grow out nicely, hoping that it does well in here and the roots don't rot off. Again, it's sort of a learning lesson, so we'll see how we go. That's what that one's looking like. All right, I'm gonna go water it up. All right. So, there we go. What a beautiful cutting. I really hope this one does okay. Let's just get these roots a little more contact again with the substrate. All right, pon is finished. Now, we're not going to be using no drainage. We could, but not for soil. Not a fan of it with soil. I need to get some clear pots. All right. So I was tossing up between 14 centimetre and 10 centimetre pots. Lubricate the vocal cords again. But I think the 10s, the 10 might be a snug fit, but still the roots are kind of touching the bottom pretty easily, so, but I don't know, that's probably a bit of overkill for that one at least, so maybe we do a 10 for this little guy, and I might even be able to sort of rest it like so to keep the end of the cutting out of the soil. That might work nicely actually, just like that. And for this one, it's probably going to do much better in a 14. All right, so I'm just going to use my chunky mix. We'll pot this one up. Hopefully it does okay like that. Again, I may, just to be sure, cover up these ends with a bit of this charcoal. All right, so it is a bit dodgy, but we'll see how this goes. Again, trying to learn, see if this is a good technique. I can seem to sort of get the roots to hang down into the cup here, to the pot rather. So, well, I probably should put a bit of soil at the bottom first. Get rid of these huge chunks of cocoa coir. All right, and because this is so precarious, you'll see that the leaf is kind of moving around. What can I do? I might just get either a bit of tape or a bit of wire to hold it in place so that it doesn't move too much. What I can probably use is just a rubber band, to be honest. Shouldn't do too much damage to it as long as it doesn't move around. Yeah, hopefully that'll do nicely. Rubber band there should hold things in place and do so firmly but gently. And what I am going to do with these, I haven't mentioned yet, but I am going to inoculate them with mycorrhizal fungus as well. I think that should work okay. Boom. Again, learning. I haven't tried that before with rubber bands. All right, so same thing again here. I'm going to chuck some of this charcoal on the ends. All right, and that one is done too. Looking good, like you should. So I think that's really it, guys. What I will do and I may show you, is chuck all of these cuttings here into one of the pots that I'm already propagating with. Just trying to check too, is there an axillary bud that I could totally take advantage of? This seems to be 2 nodes, but we might just leave it as is and see how it goes. All right, before we do that though, I'll show you the mycorrhizal fungus application. It's pretty complex. All right, so this is the brand that I use, and all you need to do is open her up and grab your little cup. It looks like just a kind of rocky, pellety kind of mix, and I just mix it around the surface of the soil. So we'll do half on this guy and then half on this one, maybe a bit more on this bigger one, and you just water it in and the fungus should just grow. Probably, I think I already did inoculate the leca here, so there should be some in there, but just in case, might as well give it another go, you know. So I will go give these a water. I'm just thinking I didn't inoculate the guys in pond, but I might have to remember to do that next time I water them. We'll go give these a thorough drenching, and then we'll chuck them all in the room, and I'll show you what I'll do with the cuttings. Okay, thoroughly soaked. So let's go chuck these in the room, set them up, and we'll put the cuttings in the jar. Okay, so epilepsy warning, because we are coming into my room with a lot of LED lights that flash quite a lot on screen, and I had someone with epilepsy tell me the other day that they fortunately turned it off, but yeah, warning, I'm coming into my plant room, okay? And you guys will see why, right? Okay, so there's so much going on here, and the light's turned off, unfortunately, so you can't see it as well as normal, but I was thinking I'll chuck it into this jar that I have down here full of water. You can't really see it behind the pink princess, but real estate seems to be somewhat limited if I want light to be hitting everything, so I may have to set something else up. I have another one over here, but it's a similar story. There's a lot of Escalito and Philodendron Florida Beauties in there, and I need to top that up. So I think we're just going to chuck it into here, guys. I might have to do this off camera, but that's going to be it. I'll show you afterwards. Okay, bam. We've filled it up a bit more with water. I actually did chuck this container in there because it's just it just looks a bit dodgy, guys, and especially when you fill this up with water. We've sort of situated them all like a sort of, what would you say, rosette, a floral bouquet here to try and make sure everything is getting a bit of light. And yeah, hopefully they all do well. I'm expecting in a month or so they should be good to pot up, but we'll see how they go. And I also need to get in here at some point and see what's going on and what's ready to come out. These, I'm still so amazed at how good these emergent leaves look on the cuttings that have been sitting in here, and it has just been water with a bit of nutrient solution in it, and yeah, they've been going off, guys. They've been going off like a frog in a sock. Everything is still alive in here. We got all sorts of stuff, but yeah, I'll get in there soon and try and do a video on it. And last but not least, I had to show you this. I'm so proud. This is one of my sculprums, and these leaves have just hardened off. No spider mite damage, lush, so beautiful. Check it out. Like, I feel like it's the birth of another child, right? That's how proud I am of this plant. It's doing so well. Hopefully I haven't just jinxed it. But yeah, these sculprums, they can look a little crusty. These guys seem to be holding on, but they are so worth the hype, right? They are just absolutely beautiful. And far out, when you start propagating stuff, you definitely run out of space quickly, guys. Like, shit is getting out of control. Pretty quick. And I just sold a bunch of stuff too and just refilled it from propagating. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you got something out of this video, even if it was just a bit of a laugh. Check out this one next, and I'll see you there. Tooroo.